Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of a fisherman who casts his net in the water. And he describes the 4 different kinds of fish that are there in the water. One, the first, the smart one, sees the net coming and quickly swims out of reach. He never gets caught. The second one is a little slow, but he manages to wriggle out of the net soon enough. The third, much slower. He doesn't realize what's happening until he gets caught in the net, but at least he is aware and he tries his best to get out. He may not succeed. But the fourth, completely unaware, when the net engulfs him, he bites the net, feeling that all is well, when seconds later, that fish is going to die. From this, Sri Ramakrishna connects it to the 4 kinds of people that the Gita speaks of, which we briefly saw yesterday. The 4 different kinds are, the first, the Jnani, who never gets caught, Nitya Mukta, ever free. He lives in the world, he transacts with everyone like any one of us, but is always free, internally. Sannyasi, who in the initial stages is involved in the world, but manages to break free, he is Mukta. Third, Yogi. He's caught, but he's struggling to break free, Mumukshu. And the fourth is the Bhogi, Baddha, bound, but doesn't know that he's bound. It's like a prisoner in a prison. The prisoner doesn't remember that he's in a prison for very long because he gets so acclimatized to that environment that becomes his world. And that is the Bhogi. Most of us belong to this category. You're bound, but you don't know that you're bound. So, let's take a brief look at these 4 categories, because therein lies our salvation. You can then spot where you belong and then make an attempt to move to the next level. This, mind you, is not for you to sit there and criticize and judge others. When you come to know Bhogi, Yogi, Sannyasi, Jnani, you go home this evening armed with more ammunition to hit out at your mother-in-law maybe and say, you are a Bhogi. It's not meant for that. It's meant for self-awareness, self-analysis, and self-improvement. So, the very first thing is, Bhogi lacks self-sufficiency and therefore needs to depend on something or the other in the world. It's like a creeper. A creeper cannot exist by itself. It needs to twine around a tree. Only then can it exist or survive. Bhogis are like that. So therefore, they are terribly attached to the world. The source of attachment is lack of self-sufficiency. A yogi has understood the futility of the world and has changed to the spiritual path, but he's not yet self-sufficient, so he's attached to the spiritual path. A sannyasi, dispassionate. Dispassionate towards the world, dispassionate towards the spiritual path. The only thing that matters to a sannyasi is getting to enlightenment. And a jnani is free, totally detached. Then comes the nature of the bhogi is that he has too many desires and therefore he has to go into the world to look for fulfillment of these desires. A yogi has desires, but at least he's trying to reduce the number of desires. So there's an immediate relief there. A sannyasi has very few desires. And what you need to understand is that desire comes in the way of your success, desire comes in the way of your happiness, desire comes in the way of your growth. Desire is the virus that is affecting you. And so the less the number of desires, the greater the achievement, the greater the happiness, and you grow. A Jnani, zero desires. You remember the happiness formula we saw yesterday? The denominator is zero, so the Jnani has hit infinite happiness. With reference to the world, material, a bhogi is very poor. Now, richness or poorness is determined not by the assets that you have, not by the wealth that you accumulate, but the difference between your wealth and assets and your desires. Like Plato said, poverty lies not in the decrease of one's wealth, but in the increase of one's subjective wants. So a bhogi is one, he may be wealthy, but his desires are constantly more than his assets, and therefore he is poor. A yogi is rich because even though he has many desires, he has managed to get his desires to such an extent, reduce the desires to such an extent that his assets are always more than his desires. So there is always a surplus. And there is comfort in that. When you have surplus, you feel at ease, you're comfortable, you're not running around trying to fulfill your desires or trying to gain wealth in order to fulfill the desires. A sannyasi is in the top 10 because his surplus is huge. Desires, very few. He has desires to get to realization, desire to do service to the world, desire to serve the guru maybe, and things like that, for which you don't need material assets. And because his merit is huge, he commands the resources of the world. That's why we say he belongs to the top 10. And a Jnani is a monarch, absolute master of the world. Enjoyment. A bhogi is constantly endeavoring to enjoy. As the Bhagavad Gita says, he cooks. Cooks means he acquires things maybe. He works very hard, but eats sin. Sin, mental agitations, sorrow, suffering is all that he gets. He never gets to enjoy. Look at the people who are busy businessmen, lawyers, doctors. They are working from 7 in the morning till 10, 11, 12 at night. Where is the time to enjoy? They may amass a lot of wealth, but there is no time whatsoever to enjoy it. What's the use? So what do they enjoy? What do they get? Mental agitation, stress. Yogi enjoys. His mind is a little calmer. His desires are well under control. And so there is no storm raging inside him. A sannyasi, happy, irrespective of what the world offers him or not. The sannyasi is happy at all times. And a Jnani is in infinite bliss. Action. A bhogi is selfish. Constantly the thought of self interferes with everything that he does. And therefore, he will not achieve the success that he would otherwise have achieved. It's like driving a car with one foot on the accelerator but the other foot on the brake. How will you ever realize the power of the car? Because the brake is constantly on. That brake is thought of self. A yogi has freed himself from thought of self. Genuinely, from the bottom of his heart, he is dedicated to serving a cause. And then such a person discovers the joy and the power of unselfishness. This is the thing. You see, when we speak of unselfishness, it doesn't appeal to us because we only see the pain associated with it. You don't see the pleasure that comes out of it. So, the first thing that happens is, when you learn the art of giving, then you gain. Give, you gain is the law. The way to gain is to first give. That is the price you pay for prosperity, for achievement, for success. What is the price? Attitude of giving. Unselfishness. So yogi is unselfish. Sannyasi is selfless. What's the difference? A yogi is still operating in the world. He works for a cause beyond himself, but that cause is still worldly. A sannyasi has broken free from the world. His only attention is on Brahma Vidya. And so he acts in the world without any desire for anything in the world. He doesn't even want to serve a larger purpose. He simply wants to get to Brahman, Atman, God. A Jnani has reached there. He's attained what all of us are aspiring for, and he's reached the state of trans-active. Emotions. A bhogi is constantly demanding from the world because he needs it. He's not self-sufficient, as we said. Therefore, in his relationships with people, he's constantly demanding. He has expectations, he makes demands on people, and when these demands are not met, he gets frustrated and angry. So he is the person who needs relationships the maximum, and he has the least because people get fed up. In any relationship, if you're constantly demanding, either materially, physically, emotionally, at any level, people around you, even if they would otherwise love you, otherwise would be more than willing to do things for you, now get fed up. So who do you love? You love people who don't demand, who are not attached. And the less you demand from people, the more people love you. This truth nobody understands. A yogi is one who gives at the emotional level also. He's constantly looking at your well-being. He's looking at what will make you happy, what is in your interest. Because his own selfishness is not there. So what will he work for? For your welfare. A sannyasi has true love. True love simply means the love that you profess to have minus selfishness. And a jnani has universal love. He has equal love for the entire universe. Anything and everyone in the universe, to him, is God. He sees only Atman everywhere. So, intellectual, bhogi, there's no thinking whatsoever. A bhogi is one who runs around like a chicken without a head. A lot of activity, but mistakes. Not one day can the person function without mistakes. Why? There is no thinking whatsoever. And unless there is rational, clear thinking, how can you act properly? So all your actions are insane, and therefore such a person is unsuccessful. A yogi is analytical. At least he is able to figure things out. A sannyasi, clarity. There is absolute clarity within. Therefore, perfect action, perfect emotions, wonderful relationships, no expectations, perfect understanding of the world, so on and so forth. And a jnani has gone beyond the illusion of the world, beyond Maya. Spiritually, a bhogi is hell-bent on self-destruction. Don't you see people who are constantly, it's as if they are working very hard to destroy themselves. A yogi is focused on evolution, spiritual evolution. A sannyasi on Brahman, we'll see as we go through the verses. And a Jnani has merged with the truth, has become Brahman or God. Affectation. How does the world affect such people? A Bhogi totally affected. The slightest fluctuation in the world, the slightest change in the environment completely affects such a person. A yogi, less affected. He's developed the inner strength to withstand the challenges of the world. A sannyasi, unaffected. And a jnani, zero affectation. He doesn't rest on the world, so anything can happen in the world, he's not affected. Then comes life in general. As you saw yesterday, the three transactions of life are receipt, reaction, and response. A bhogi is totally involved in this because he's full of desires. A yogi, yes, he goes through the receipts, reactions, and response. But at least there's an element of sanity in what he's doing. A sannyasi perceives, receives stimuli, and very few reactions. A jnani just receives stimuli, only receipts, nothing else. And so therefore, a bhogi is constantly creating more desires, more vasanas, more impurity in his system. A yogi is struggling very hard to reduce the vasanas. A sannyasi wants to eliminate the few that he has, and a jnani has already reached there. So, with this, there is much more in terms of differentiation between these four categories.